very last residual source of eggs. During the early stages of investigating the mayfly, my friends often called it my lunchbox period. What we did was we got the mayfly adults to lay the eggs onto lunchboxes, and we then placed these out into little lakes that had no natural stock of mayfly in them. It was very exciting to move into the sediment after just 11 months, to dig around and to pull up on your hand then these great big nymphs with big dark shoulders. The wing pads were already developed, ready to hatch. That really was very exciting. I moved from the Central Fisheries Board to the Salmon Research Agency in 1989. The agency is based at Burrishoole in County Mayo. The main problem facing us when I arrived at Burrishoole was the whole question of the disappearance of the sea trout and how we were actually going to produce sea trout eggs in order to restock the rivers. We only had a handful of wild sea trout, and we literally had to convince these fish that they were in fact fish farm fish. What we have here in this sea cage is something really rather special. We have wild adult sea trout, but a colleague of mine, Russell Poole, has convinced them that they're actually fish farm fish, and they're feeding away avidly and growing quickly on fish farm pellets. We fed them a very delicate diet. First of all, we stuffed them full with maggots. Then we fed them maggots and wet bread, moved on to wet bread and wet fish food, and then finally to dry fish food. And lo and behold, within about 3 months, they really were convinced that they'd always lived in a cage. The ones that we've held for a few years are magnificent looking big brown trout. And the reason for that is that they've been held in brackish water rather than in full salt. But we hope that this hasn't changed in any way or altered any of the genetic aspects of the fish so that it really can produce sea trout. Our sea trout programme is actually run by Russell Poole. And what Russell has established now is a sea trout enhancement unit with lots of little baby sea trout, all of different ages, that will be stocked out and used for different purposes.
Okay.
Well, the first sign we had of a really serious problem was that the numbers of fish at Burrishoole dropped from over 1,000 in terms of spawners some 15 or so years ago, down to 20 spawning fish in 1989. The main symbol of the sea trout problem is the early return of the tiny little sea trout smolts after only a few weeks at sea with very heavy infestations of lice. My own view is that this problem really is one that can only be resolved by rational management. And it's a shame that it wasn't tackled earlier, because the solution is a benign one. It's surely in the interest of both the fish farmer and indeed the person running a wild fishery to have the numbers of lice controlled on the fish farm. In stocking out the sea trout, they have to be moved up into the mountain streams because sea trout are really little mountain climbers. They will go to the most extraordinary heights and follow the tiniest of streams right up nearly to their source. Russell brings up the various little sea trout, having pre-surveyed the streams, and stocks them out at predetermined levels in order to make sure that they are repopulated with juvenile sea trout. It's best to do the stocking when the temperatures are quite low, and it means that the fish arrive at the river in a very healthy state. This massive great net is used to sample the trout populations in Lough Fia. They're actually tackling the basic problem of what makes a sea trout. We're trying to find out the difference between the little sea trout that go to sea and their brothers and sisters that stay back in fresh water and never migrate.
Nice and steady now.
At this point in the lake, they're absolutely indistinguishable to the eye. So what we're looking at is the growth rate of the fish, the actual morphology, the actual shape of the body. And we're also looking at the stage of maturity of the fish in finite detail, because we think that the state of maturity actually designates whether or not fish will go to sea or whether it will stay in fresh water. The tagging tells us which of them move through the traps, but also the tagging gives us an estimate of the population. Because, you know, as we tag them and release them, we capture them again. And that's actually what Russell is showing you, that he's got one back that has already been tagged and one that isn't. So there's two jobs. There's the job of actually seeing which of them migrate down, and it also gives you an idea of how many fish are actually in the population, how many are in the lake.
It's a sea trout that hasn't gone to sea. And we'll give that a pelt.
Having captured the fish, it's important then that we give them a mark. And what we do is remove, first of all, the little adipose fin on the back. We then take some scales, which gives us the age of the fish. And then we also give them a dye mark or panjet. And as the fish move through the traps, we know exactly when and where we've actually tagged these particular fish.
We'll give it a panjet mark.
Well, in reality, sea trout up to recently was only the minor species. Our real core business, and still remains so, is working on salmon. And as salmon move up from the sea into the estuary, obviously there's a whole range of fishermen ready to take their share of the catch. Some of them have feathers, and some of them have fur, and some of them have nets, and some of them have rods. Well, this is a traditional draft net station, and some people have great worries about draft nets and think that they're going to catch every fish in the river. My own view is that there is a place for well-run draft net fisheries for grills. It's a film called Watching the Wildlife. Any sea trout caught are quickly returned to the water. Having moved up past the draft nets then, the fish move up into the world-famous ridge pool. And the ridge pool is really very much sought after by anglers. They'll often book a year, 18 months in advance. And it's certainly the ambition of most salmon anglers to fish the ridge pool at least once. Well, in reality, having passed the anglers, they move up then into the area where the traps are, or cribs. These are structures that are there since the Norman times, but there is a free gap, and quite a generous one. And on certain tides and with certain winds, the bulk of the fish actually move up through the traps. At other times, the bulk of the fish go up through the free gap. And in fact, it's quite a fair system overall, certainly for grills.
And you see them coming in the net, you see William there lifting of a sudden rather than going to the very end. That'd be when the fish hit the net.
I was surprised, I didn't realise that he was on the bottom. When I asked him there, didn't he go,
Oh, he was on the bottom, yeah.
when the fish get past the traps, they then have other problems to face in some catchments, and most of these are man-made. There could be problems with pollution, there could be problems with deforestation, or indeed there could be problems with overgrazing.
This is the way forestry used to be planted in Ireland. The trees right up along the banks.
And this caused a lot of problems because the trees could fall into the river, blocking the movement of the fish upstream. Also, the branches shaded the river and made sure that algae and plants found it very, very difficult to grow. But this stream has added problems because it flows over very hard rocks, like this quartz. And that means that the stream itself finds it very difficult to deal with acid, to neutralize the acid. But the coniferous forests, the pine forests, they actually concentrate the acid by concentrating the pollutants and the sea salt, and then putting the concentrated acid out into the streams themselves. This is the confluence of two streams at Burrishoole, which really typifies the problems that are related to afforestation. The stream on the left is one that is suffering from acidification, whereas the stream hidden around the bank there on the right flows over limestone and is well buffered and is actually free of any problems from acid. The basis of all life in these mountain streams is light, and the light creates all kinds of mosses and algae on the stones, what people often call slimy stones. Fishermen and anglers and biologists, they love to see slimy stones. It means life. If you have acid in a stream, it's as if the stream has just been polished freshly by a new glacier. The stones are shining, they're bright, and they're absolutely clear of any vestige of vegetation. Well, the other stream has stones that are covered in all sorts of moss and algae, and that provides an abundance of habitat for all of the little underwater creatures that are so important to the feeding of trout and salmon. When you pick up the stones, you can see all sorts of little nymphs and larvae moving around across the base of the stone, and these provide a food source for all of the trout and salmon in the stream. This falls behind me was originally a 14-foot drop. It meant that the upper section of our catchment was largely inaccessible to salmon and sea trout. But by the insertion of 3 small weirs, we were able to open up an extra 1/10 of the catchment. And that provided us with something approaching 30,000 square meters of extra spawning and feeding areas for the little salmon and trout. This, we hope, will make a huge difference in future years to the production of smolts of both salmon and sea trout in the Burrishoole catchment. Overgrazing is really a management problem. It's a problem that's been brought about by subsidies, and there's no doubt that these subsidies have provided people with a reasonable standard of living. But the truth is that these delicate hillsides just can't take this overgrazing. We have to give them a chance. We must let the grasses come back and let the hillside stabilize. This mountain that you see here behind me was originally swathed in heather. Indeed, it was originally a grouse moor. But one of the major problems that we're facing now is overgrazing from sheep. And this overgrazing can have very severe consequences. As a result of the overgrazing, the peat slips off the mountainsides and down into the stream, as you see here behind me, and down into the lake. When we get a strong north or northwest wind, the peat is brought back into suspension in the lake and is driven down into the hatchery, causing quite severe mortalities amongst our salmon eggs. This sort of problem also has the potential to damage wild salmon eggs in the streams and other mountain areas. The situation on this mountainside is now really so serious that we need action, and we need it now. Any agri-environment initiatives that are being taken must take into account areas like this and must give them priority above anything else, I think, in the west of Ireland. On the mountainside, really, you're left with just inert bog, and mixed in with the bog is just the fibres and the little threads of the remnants of the heather and all of the other vegetation, the grasses that were there originally. But really, these are just dead structures, and they're really just a dead legacy of what was a living structure before this. Philip McGinnity is a geneticist that works with us at the agency, and his main job at the moment is to look at the possible impact of fish farm escapees on wild salmon. There's been a lot of debate about whether or not fish farm fish are as good as wild fish at surviving when planted out in wild streams. In conjunction with Declan Cook, the two of them are now sampling for small salmon that are moving downstream in this little river here, which is called the Rough River, one of our main feeder streams in Burrishoole. Philip has developed, in conjunction with a friend of his, Andy Ferguson in Belfast, a technique based on DNA fingerprinting that the police use. And that technique is so precise that each little fish that Philip takes out of his trap, he can relate directly back genetically to its parents and see whether or not a wild fish, a fish farm fish, or any of the hybrids actually have an advantage when planted out into the stream. The numbers of fish farm fish entering Irish rivers, in comparison, say, to Scotland or Norway, are quite small. But we are concerned that the fish are mainly of Norwegian or Scottish origin. And we are worried that by crossing with our fish, that the hybrids may not survive quite as well as the wild fish would. But this is the first time we've had a chance to actually test this in a field situation, and it's quite unique. We're actually very well situated to look at eels as well as salmon and sea trout. I think maybe we should rename our agency, because we dabble in everything now at this stage. But eels has been something that we've looked at for quite a length of time. We're situated on the outer rim of Europe, so we're an ideal counting station. And we monitor the number of eels going to sea on a yearly basis. And we also look at the biology of the eels, some of which can be 40, 45 years of age and only 6 or 7 pound weight in Burrishoole.
This is a baby eel, or elver. This is his big brother here. He could be 26 or 27 years of age. But this little fella here, he's just travelled about 3,000 miles. And he doesn't look a bit tired. He left the Saragossa Sea, which is near Bermuda, about a year ago. And he's drifted the whole of the North Atlantic. You know, people around here aren't used to us putting back salmon at all. The first time I tried it here on the mill race, about 2 years ago, I got quite an unexpected reply from one of the locals. I was here with an angling scientist from Britain, and he just caught his first salmon. And I said to him, "Do you really want the fish?" "No," he said, "I've no use for it." Well, I said to him, "I don't want it either. Let's put it back." And we both had our backs to the stream. We put back the fish. There was the most dreadful scream from the road. "What the hell did you do that for?" And I turned around, and there was one of our eminent local businessmen, frantic above on the wall. He said to me, "What the hell did you put the fish back for?" I innocently turned around and I said to him, "But we didn't want it." "By God, I'll tell you," he said, "if you wouldn't eat it, there's plenty in Newport Wood."
Long before Burrishoole got a reputation as a scientific institute, it was a very famous angling centre. And to date, we still get loads of anglers coming to visit us. Very often, 80% or more of the people coming have already been with us at least once or twice before.
Where most of the fish line came.
As they come up to the bridge, they're moving right through up the furnace. But any of them that are going to lie in along the edge of the seaweed there. But they'll only just dally just for a few moments and then they're off again.
Do you mean they're off up into the lake?
Yeah. But they may not go straight into the lake. They do all sorts of strange things here. It's quite interesting to watch them. They'll move in with the tide. But then as the tide comes back out again, some of them lodge above and come back down on the next tide and then go up again. And I think the ones that, most of the ones that stay around here are ranched fish. Probably ones that aren't great at homing and aren't quite sure what their final intentions are, whether or not they're home.
There's fish moving up along there now.
Yeah, right in along the edge of the seaweed.
But they're not taking.
No. Not at the moment. What you want is a fish that's just sitting for a few moments. Oh, Eamon, I'm in. I don't want to bring him into the shallow water because of the seaweed.
Okay, Ken. Here you are. I can't go out very far because it's too deep. I'll hand it to you.
It's a fresher one, Eamon. It's a wild one. I'll put him back.
I'm sure he'd be delighted.
Well, he'll give us an extra 3,500 eggs this autumn.
Well worth it, isn't it?
I see he's net damaged. He's damaged by a gill net in the back.
And where would that have happened?
Looks fairly fresh, on his way in, and he's sea lice on him as well. And the long tails on them, they're the egg streams. They're females.
And they will drop off in fresh
They
water?
will drop off in fresh
Yes.
water.
But where's the net mark?
Just there, aiming on the top of the dorsal fin.
I see.
He's only been clipped, but some of them get very bad net marks.
So he just hit the net and got out again?
And got out again, yeah.
Yeah.
He probably just hit that on the way in.
There are a few more lice just behind its fin.
Just a nice number.
Yeah.
I'm going to let him go now. He's very frisky.
All right. Well,
Okay.
off we go.
Now I'll just massage his heart and... Now, see you tonight.
Great.
Away he
It's
goes.
gone. Great. Lovely. Well, I like to see them being put back.
Oh yeah, well, the staff here, we put back all of the wild fish.
Great.
We just keep the ranched fish, and the way we look at it is each wild fish we put back, as I say, is a net donation of 3,500 eggs to the catchment.
Well, it's well worth it, isn't it?
And our numbers of wild fish are small, so we've had our fun out of them, and that's the way we look at it.
Great. So I'll hold the net. You go off again.
Okay. Pity you haven't got your boots. You could have a go.
I can cast from here.
It's often claimed locally in Newport that the only reason we work hard on these experiments is so that we can provide more fish for ourselves, because most of us do angle and we enjoy it very much.